Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Scraps of fabric, discarded sketches, and half-finished garments littered every available surface in the cramped studio apartment. In the midst of this creative chaos stood Avery, her brow furrowed in concentration as she meticulously stitched the final touches on her latest creation. "Damn it," she muttered under her breath, pricking her finger for the umpteenth time that morning. She sucked on the injured digit, her eyes never leaving the intricate beadwork she'd been laboring over for hours. The sudden buzz of her phone startled her, causing her to nearly drop the delicate piece. She fumbled for the device, tucked away beneath a mountain of fashion magazines. "Hello?" she answered, wedging the phone between her ear and shoulder as she returned to her work. The voice on the other end spoke rapidly, and Avery's eyes widened with each passing second. Her hands began to tremble, and she set down her needle, giving the caller her full attention. "Are you serious? The Milano Fashion Week?" She gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course, I'd be honored. Yes, absolutely. I'll have everything ready. Thank you so much for this opportunity." As she ended the call, a mixture of elation and panic washed over her. This was it, her big break, the chance she'd been waiting for her entire career. But with only 2 weeks to prepare, she knew she had her work cut out for her. Avery's mind raced as she paced the small apartment, mentally cataloging everything she needed to do. Finalize the designs, source materials, arrange fittings with the models. Her stomach dropped as she realized she was one short. Her usual go-to had just landed a major campaign and wouldn't be available. Finding a replacement on such short notice would be next to impossible. She collapsed onto her worn-out sofa, burying her face in her hands. After a moment of self-pity, she took a deep breath and reached for her phone again. There was only one person she could turn to in a crisis like this. The line rang twice before a groggy voice answered. "Avery, what's wrong? It's not even noon yet." "Chris, I need your help," she blurted out, the words tumbling over each other in her haste. "I just got the opportunity of a lifetime, but I'm in a bind. Can you come over? Like, now?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by a resigned sigh. "Give me 20 minutes. True to his word, exactly 20 minutes later, there was a knock at Avery's door. She flung it open to reveal her brother, Chris, looking decidedly disheveled in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, his hair sticking up at odd angles. "This better be good," he grumbled, shuffling past her into the apartment. He stopped short, taking in the explosion of fabrics and sketches. "Whoa, did a fashion bomb go off in here?" Avery ignored his quip, grabbing his arm and steering him towards the couch. "Sit, I have news." Chris raised an eyebrow but complied, sinking into the cushions. "All right, spill. What's got you so worked up?" Taking a deep breath, Avery perched on the edge of the coffee table across from him. "I just got a call from the organizers of Milano Fashion Week. They want me to showcase my designs." Chris's eyes widened, a grin spreading across his face. "Av, that's amazing! Congratulations!" "Thanks," she said, her smile faltering slightly. "But here's the thing. I'm short a model. My usual girl just booked a huge campaign and can't make it. I've got 2 weeks to pull this all together, and I have no idea where I'm going to find a replacement on such short notice." Chris's brow furrowed in confusion. "Okay, but what does that have to do with me? You know I don't know anyone in the fashion world." Avery took another deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to say. "That's not exactly why I called you over." "Then why did you—" Chris trailed off, realization dawning on his face. He leapt to his feet, shaking his head vehemently. "Oh no, 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 absolutely not." "Chris, please." Avery stood as well, her eyes pleading. "I wouldn't ask if I had any other choice. You're my last hope." Have you lost your mind?" Chris gestured wildly at himself. "I'm not model material. I'm a software engineer, for crying out loud. I spend my days hunched over a computer, not strutting down runways." Avery grabbed his hands, forcing him to look at her. "That's exactly why this could work. You're a blank canvas. With the right styling, makeup, and clothes, we could transform you into something completely unexpected. It'll be edgy, avant-garde. Exactly what I need to make a splash at Fashion Week." Chris pulled away, running a hand through his messy hair.
"This is insane. I don't know the first thing about modeling. I'd make a fool of myself. And worse, I'd make a fool of you." "I'll teach you everything you need to know," Avery insisted, following him as he paced the small living room. "We've got 2 weeks.
That's plenty of time for a crash course in runway walking and posing." "And what about my job? I can't just take off for a fashion show in Milan."
Avery waved a dismissive hand. "It's only for a weekend. Take a couple of personal days. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Chris. Not just for me, but for you too. How many people can say they've walked in Milano Fashion Week?" Chris stopped pacing, turning to face his sister. He saw the desperation in her eyes, the hope mixed with fear. He knew how much this meant to her, how hard she'd worked for a break like this, and, despite his reservations, he couldn't bear the thought of letting her down. With a heavy sigh, he threw up his hands in defeat. "Fine. I must be out of my mind, but fine. I'll do it."
Avery let out a squeal of delight, throwing her arms around him in a tight hug. "Thank you, thank you, thank you! You won't regret this, I promise!" Chris hugged her back, already wondering what he'd gotten himself into.
"I better not. So, what's first on this makeover agenda of yours?"
Avery pulled back, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Everything. We're going to remake you from the ground up. By the time I'm done with you, your own mother won't recognize you." Over the next few days, Avery's apartment became a whirlwind of activity. Every spare moment was dedicated to Chris's transformation. They started with the basics, a complete wardrobe overhaul. "Seriously?" Chris complained as Avery ruthlessly went through his closet, tossing item after item into a donation pile. "What's wrong with my clothes?" Avery held up a particularly offensive plaid shirt, her eyebrow raised in judgment. "Do you really want me to answer that?" Chris grumbled, but didn't argue further. He watched in dismay as his comfortable, familiar wardrobe was replaced with sleek, form-fitting pieces in a monochromatic palette. "Black, white, and shades of gray," Avery explained as she helped him into a slim-cut blazer. "It's classic, versatile, and it'll make you look taller and leaner." Chris tugged at the collar, feeling uncomfortably exposed. "I feel like I can't breathe in this." "Beauty is pain, dear brother," Avery quipped, adjusting the fit. "You'll get used to it." Next came grooming. Avery dragged Chris to her favorite salon, where he endured hours of pampering he'd never asked for. His shaggy hair was trimmed and styled into a sleek, modern cut. His eyebrows were shaped, his nails buffed and polished.
"Is all this really necessary?"
he asked, as the esthetician applied a cooling face mask. "Absolutely," Avery replied from the next chair over, flipping through a fashion magazine. "Your skin needs to be in top condition for the show. We can't have you looking like you just rolled out of bed in front of the cameras." As the days passed, Chris found himself undergoing a crash course in all things fashion and modeling. Avery drilled him on designers, trends, and industry terminology. She taught him how to pose, how to walk with confidence, and how to project the right attitude on the runway. "It's all about attitude," she explained as they practiced in her living room, Chris teetering on a pair of heeled boots. "You're not just wearing the clothes. You're selling a fantasy, a lifestyle. You need to make everyone watching believe that they want to be you." Chris stumbled, catching himself on the back of the couch. "Right now, the only fantasy I'm selling is one where I don't fall flat on my face." Avery smiled encouragingly. "You're doing better than you think. Remember, heel toe, and keep your shoulders back." As the days ticked by, Chris found himself slowly but surely transforming. His posture improved, his walk became more graceful. He even started to develop an eye for fashion, surprising himself by offering suggestions on accessories and styling. 1 week before they were set to leave for Milan, Avery decided it was time for the final touch: makeup. "No way!" Chris protested as Avery set up her extensive collection of cosmetics on the bathroom counter. "I draw the line at makeup." "It's not optional," Avery said firmly, patting the chair in front of her. "Makeup is an essential part of any runway look. Besides, with the right application, it can completely transform your face. Trust me." Reluctantly, Chris sat down, eyeing the array of brushes and palettes with trepidation. "Just don't make me look like a clown, okay?" Avery rolled her eyes. "Please, give me some credit." For the next hour, Chris sat still as Avery worked her magic. He felt the gentle sweep of brushes across his skin, the strange sensation of product being applied to his eyes and lips. When she finally stepped back with a satisfied smile, he barely recognized the person staring back at him in the mirror. His features had been subtly enhanced, his cheekbones more pronounced, his eyes smoky and mysterious. It wasn't garish or overdone. Instead, it looked editorial, high fashion. "Holy shit," he breathed, turning his head to examine the effect from different angles. "Is that really me?" Avery beamed, clearly proud of her handiwork. "That, dear brother, is the power of makeup. Now, do you see why it's necessary?" Chris nodded, still somewhat in awe of his reflection. "I get it now. This is... wow." As the day of departure drew near, Chris found himself caught up in Avery's excitement. Despite his initial reservations, he had to admit that the whole experience had been oddly exhilarating. He'd discovered sides of himself he never knew existed, pushed beyond his comfort zone in ways he never thought possible. The night before their flight to Milan, Avery called Chris over for one final fitting. As he slipped into the avant-garde creation she'd designed specifically for him, he couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. The garment was a work of art, asymmetrical cuts, unexpected textures, and bold color blocking that somehow came together in perfect harmony. "Ave," he said softly as she made some last-minute adjustments. "I just wanted to say thank you for pushing me to do this. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually looking forward to the show." Avery looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you for believing in me, for taking this leap of faith. I couldn't have done any of this without you." The siblings shared a moment of understanding, the bond between them stronger than ever. As they boarded the plane the next morning, Chris in his new designer sunglasses and Avery clutching her portfolio, both felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement for what lay ahead. They were stepping into a new world together, ready to take on whatever challenges Milano Fashion Week might throw their way. The flight to Milan was a blur of last-minute preparations and nervous anticipation. Avery spent most of the journey poring over her sketches, making tiny adjustments and second-guessing every decision. Chris, for his part, tried to calm his nerves by reviewing the walking techniques Avery had taught him, earning strange looks from fellow passengers as he practiced his stride up and down the aisle. As they touched down in Italy, the reality of what they were about to do finally hit home. The bustling energy of Milan during Fashion Week was palpable from the moment they stepped off the plane. The airport was a sea of stylish travelers, models, and designers, all buzzing with excitement for the events to come. "Remember," Avery whispered as they made their way through the terminal. "Confidence is key. Act like you belong here, and no one will question it." Chris nodded, straightening his posture and affecting an air of nonchalance he didn't quite feel. He was acutely aware of the eyes on them, curious glances from people trying to place where they might have seen him before. It was a strange feeling, being seen as someone noteworthy, even if it was all an illusion. Their first stop was the hotel, a sleek, modern affair in the heart of the fashion district. As they checked in, Chris couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation from the lobby names of famous designers, gossip about which celebrities might make an appearance at which shows. It was a world so far removed from his usual life of coding and coffee runs that it almost felt like stepping into an alternate reality. Once in their room, Avery wasted no time in unpacking her designs and setting up a makeshift workspace. "We've got a fitting with the other models in 2 hours," she said, her voice tight with stress. "I need to make sure everything's perfect." Chris watched as she fussed over every seam and detail, marveling at her dedication. "Ave, relax! Your designs are amazing! They're going to love them!" She shot him a grateful smile before diving back into her work. "I hope so. This could make or break my career, you know." The fitting was held in a converted warehouse space, all exposed brick and industrial chic. As they entered, Chris felt his stomach tighten with nerves. The room was filled with impossibly tall, impossibly beautiful people, all of whom seemed to exude an effortless cool he could only dream of matching. "Just breathe," Avery murmured, sensing his discomfort. "Remember, you're one of them now." One by one, the models tried on Avery's creations. Chris watched in awe as each garment came to life, transformed by the confidence and grace of the professionals wearing them. When it was finally his turn, he steeled himself, determined not to let his sister down. As he emerged from the changing area in Avery's showstopper piece, he was met with a chorus of appreciative murmurs. The designer in charge of the show, a severe-looking woman with sharp cheekbones and even sharper eyes, circled him slowly. "Interesting," she mused, her gaze analytical. "Very interesting indeed. There's something unexpected about you." "I like it." Chris felt a flush of pride, standing a little taller under her scrutiny. Maybe he could pull this off after all. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of fittings, rehearsals, and last-minute alterations. Chris threw himself into the experience, soaking up every bit of knowledge he could. He watched the other models, mimicking their walks and poses, until he felt almost comfortable in his new skin. Avery, for her part, was a bundle of nervous energy. She flitted from model to model, adjusting a hem here, tweaking an accessory there. Chris could see the toll the stress was taking on her, the dark circles under her eyes growing more pronounced with each passing day. The night before the show, as they sat in their hotel room surrounded by garment bags and makeup cases, Chris reached out and took his sister's hand. "Hey," he said softly, "you've got this. Your designs are incredible, and everyone's going to see that tomorrow." Avery squeezed his hand, her eyes welling up with tears. "What if I'm not ready? What if I'm making a huge mistake?" "You're more than ready," Chris assured her. "You've been working towards this your whole life, and even if things don't go perfectly, which they will, I'll be right there with you. We're in this together, remember?" She nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "When did you get so wise, little brother?" Chris grinned. "Must be all these fancy clothes.
They're making me sophisticated.
The morning of the show dawned bright and clear. Chris woke early, his stomach a knot of nervous excitement. As he went through the grooming routine Avery had drilled into him over the past 2 weeks, he barely recognized the person staring back at him in the mirror. Gone was the schlubby software engineer. In his place stood someone polished, confident, almost regal. Avery was already up and pacing when he emerged from the bathroom. She looked up, her face breaking into a proud smile. "Look at you," she said softly. "You really did it. You became a model." Chris struck an exaggerated pose, earning a laugh from his sister. "All thanks to you, oh great fashion guru. Now come on, let's go knock 'em dead." The venue was a historic palazzo, its grand architecture a stunning backdrop for the modern designs about to be showcased. Backstage was controlled chaos models being primped and polished, designers making frantic last-minute adjustments, harried assistants running back and forth with garment bags and accessories. Chris found himself swept up in the preparations, shuttled from makeup to hair to dressing. As the final touches were applied, he caught sight of himself in one of the full-length mirrors. The person looking back at him was a stranger, confident, mysterious, undeniably stylish. For a moment, he allowed himself to fully inhabit this new persona, to believe that he truly belonged in this glittering world. As the show's start time approached, Avery gathered her models for a final pep talk. "Remember," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves Chris could see in her eyes. "You're not just wearing clothes. You're telling a story. My story. Our story. Go out there and make them believe in the power of transformation." The music started, a pulsing beat that seemed to sync with Chris's racing heart. One by one, the models began to file out onto the runway. As he waited for his turn, Chris took a deep breath, channeling all the confidence Avery had instilled in him over the past 2 weeks.
"You've got this,"
Avery whispered, giving his hand a quick squeeze before gently pushing him towards the runway. And then he was walking, the lights blinding, the music throbbing in his ears. For a moment, the world seemed to slow down. He could feel every eye in the room on him, hear the whispers and murmurs as people took in Avery's revolutionary design. With each step, Chris felt more and more like the person he'd been pretending to be. He reached the end of the runway, paused for a beat, then turned with a flourish that would have made Avery proud. As he made his way back, he caught a glimpse of his sister's face in the crowd, her eyes shining with pride and unshed tears. In that moment, all the doubts and fears of the past 2 weeks melted away. They had done it. Together, they had transformed not just Chris's appearance, but themselves. They had taken a leap of faith and landed on their feet, striding confidently into a future full of possibilities. As Chris disappeared backstage, the applause still ringing in his ears, he knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. He had discovered a part of himself he never knew existed, and Avery had proven to the world, and more importantly, to herself, that she belonged among the fashion elite. The rest of the show passed in a blur of quick changes and adrenaline-fueled walks. When it was finally over, and Avery took her bow to thunderous applause, Chris felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. This was his sister's moment, the culmination of years of hard work and dedication, and he had been privileged to be a part of it. Backstage, amidst the chaos of post-show congratulations and critiques, the siblings found a moment to embrace. "We did it," Avery whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "We really did it." Chris hugged her tighter, feeling the weight of the journey they'd undertaken together. "No, Ave, You did it! I just wore the clothes! This is all you!" As they pulled apart, both laughing and wiping away tears, they were surrounded by a swarm of industry insiders, all clamoring to speak with the designer of the moment. Chris stepped back, content to watch as Avery fielded compliments and fielded questions with grace and poise. A tall, elegant woman with a shock of silver hair approached Chris, her eyes appraising. "You're new to this, aren't you?" she asked, her accent crisp and decidedly British. Chris nodded, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "Is it that obvious?" The woman smiled, a knowing glint in her eye. "Only to those who know what to look for. You have a freshness, an authenticity that's rare in this world. It's quite refreshing, actually." She extended a perfectly manicured hand. "Vivian St. Clair, Editor-in-Chief of Vogue UK. I'd very much like to feature you and your sister in our next issue. I think your story of transformation would resonate with our readers." Chris blinked, momentarily stunned. Wow, that's incredibly kind of you. I'd have to talk to Avery, of course, but..." Vivian waved a dismissive hand. Of course. Here's my card. Do be in touch, won't you?" As she glided away, Chris stared at the embossed card in his hand, still not quite believing what had just happened. He looked up to find Avery making her way towards him, her face flushed with excitement. "Chris, you'll never believe who I just talked to. The buyer from Bergdorf's wants to carry my line." He grinned, holding up the business card. "Oh yeah? Well, the editor of Vogue UK wants to do a feature on us." Avery's jaw dropped. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the magnitude of what they'd accomplished slowly sinking in. Then, as if on cue, they both burst into laughter, the joy and relief of the moment bubbling over. As the night wore on and the after-party got into full swing, Chris found himself in a surreal state of disbelief. Here he was, rubbing elbows with fashion's elite, sipping champagne, and discussing upcoming trends as if he'd been doing it his whole life. And yet, beneath the polished exterior and designer clothes, he was still the same person he'd always been, just with a newfound confidence and appreciation for the transformative power of fashion. In a quiet moment, he caught Avery's eye across the room. She was deep in conversation with a group of influential designers, but she paused to give him a warm smile and a subtle thumbs up. In that gesture, he saw all the love, gratitude, and shared accomplishment of their journey. As the party continued around him, Chris allowed himself a moment of reflection. 2 weeks ago, he never could have imagined himself in this world. Now, he couldn't imagine his life without this experience. He had stepped out of his comfort zone and into a new reality, one filled with endless possibilities.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!